You're listening to Beyond the Measure, Episode 8. Listen as I, a young choir director, and my husband, a young composer, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure.
Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond the Measure. I'm your host, Christian, here with my co-host,
Kara.
And we're here yet again with another wonderful guest on our show. He is here with a really nice drink. It is a cup of HTO.
Oh,
what kind of
what
type of tea
oh
did
gosh,
you get?
so this is the Jana special.
Jana special.
Shout out. There's an employee there named Jana, and she concocted this and put it on their secret menu, which they have a secret menu, by the way. I'm assuming that's different at every location. But it's like the sweet blueberry green mixed with the Ryan Palmer. Must be a trademark on the Arnold Palmer.
Right.
But
I guess so.
I guess.
So, it's very good.
Wonderful.
I used to make my way around the menu until I found this one, and now it's this every time.
Oh, wow.
HTO is like my new favorite tea place.
Sponsor?
Yeah, sponsor, right? Yeah, shout out. The other day, this last week, we had a couple of our first, we call them, at HSU, we call them Cowboy Connect events, and it's where all of not all, but a lot of the students that are planning on coming in next year, they all come to campus, and it's kind of where we start getting them oriented and get them registered for classes and everything. But anyway, at the end of the day, we have a farewell party outside, and they had an HTO booth, and so they just had a bunch of HTO, and so I went over there like 3 or 4 times a day to get a new cup of tea. So anyways, it was really good. I'm looking at the cup. Is it just Texas, or is that?
I think it is. Yeah, I think they're all over Texas.
Born in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But our listeners are probably like, why are they still talking about tea?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Southerners
But
and their tea.
anyways, but yeah, we should introduce our guest. Do you want to introduce our guest, Kara?
Sure. We have Brady McNeil. He is the director. You're the director of bands at McMurry
correct.
University.
Mm-hmm.
That's another Abilene University. We have like a whole bunch.
We have a lot.
And we met him through the Chorus Abilene. We talked, I don't know if this will be before or after Abigail's episode, but we were in the same group, a cappella group, Backbeat, and that's kind of how we met.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Brady here, he has, and it's kind of nice that we've already had multiple people on our show that have multiple backgrounds. Brady has a background in band as well as choir, and he does a lot of teaching, and he does some composition stuff as well, which is really cool. But yeah, we met through Backbeat, and it's always been a good time over there, and we need to have Soraya Peters, who's the director of that group. We'll have to have her on here pretty soon. But yeah, Brady, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. It's, I've listened to all the episodes that have been released so far, and I'm like, oh man, I cannot follow D-Row Minds. Are you kidding me? And knowing that you've had Bernie Scher and Abigail and all these other people, and I'm like, all right, well, I hope that I sound half as wise as them, although I know that comes with time. But
oh yeah, no, this is great. This is great. Now, how long have you been in Abilene?
Let's see, what month is it?
It is May.
It is May.
Is May. So then, in that case, I've been here for 9 months. I moved here July 31st. So still fresh to Abilene, fresh to Texas.
That's cool. Well, were you gonna say anything?
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
How do you like Abilene actually?
It's growing on me. That's how I always tell people. At first, I did not know how I felt about it, just because Texas has been a slight culture shock. I'm from Alabama, so it's still the South, but it's a different type of South, and so moving here at first, it was definitely an adjustment. And so people would ask me that question when I want to move, like, how do you like Abilene? And you can tell by the way they ask you that they really love it. And so you're like, it's great. But in reality, you're just trying to stay afloat when you first move to a new town.
Yeah.
But now that I can navigate without a GPS, that's like my that's like my check mark that I'm good to go. So, but yeah, I really do like it, and the people here are amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, and I feel like we're kind of new to Abilene. We were here for 4 years, but lived on campus.
Oh yeah.
But now we're
officially living here,
residing here. It's grown on us. So
yeah, for sure.
We really like it.
I feel like that's the way Abilene is for a lot of people, or at least people that come from outside of Abilene. Usually, most of the people we've talked to that are not originally from Abilene love it, and all the people that are from Abilene want to get out of it.
I've had that experience with everyone I talk to. Anybody who's from here is like, get me out, and then everybody that I know that's not from here is like, oh, it'll suck you in.
Yeah,
no, it's true. My voice teacher in high school, and I told her I was going to Hardin, and she was like, well, once you graduate, leave because you will stay there.
Not that it's a bad place,
it's
but
not a bad thing.
No,
for sure. That's funny. Well, you may have to stay here a couple more years to really get an idea, and I don't know why I'm talking about, bringing up football on this podcast, but I'm just curious on, what, from your perspective, if you think Texas or Alabama football is more intense. And marching band, maybe that's something you can say, like marching band and stuff.
Okay, so I think football is more intense in the Southeast just because like SEC, everybody lives, breathes, eats football.
That makes sense.
And we do, of course, have SEC schools here. Well, one. But, it's football-wise, it seems a little more in-depth in the Southeast, but band-wise is a lot more intense here, for sure, with with UIL and all that stuff. Because we don't really have anything like that exists with the state of Alabama. So anybody who does, like, the competitive circuit goes, like, the BOA route. For those who don't know, that's Bands of America. And it's different, because everyone's not required to participate. Not that, not that everybody's required to participate in UIL, but obviously there's sort of everyone does it. It's a thing.
For sure. Cool. All right. Well, let's just start with you telling us, how did you decide you wanted to do music going to college? And also, first of all, start us off by saying, what degrees you have and from where, and then you can kind of start from the beginning and kind of tell us how you got there and everything.
Sure. All right. So I did, like I said, I'm from Alabama, so I did my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's in music education. And like most schools, it was split instrumental vocal. So covered both a little bit. And so I did that at Auburn University in Alabama. And then I did my master's in music theory at the University of Tennessee. So I sort of stayed in that SEC life. And ended up circling back and doing my PhD in instrumental music education back at Auburn.
Gotcha.
Familiar stuff there. So
cool. Nice.
The music story, not that it's a non-traditional path, but I feel like there have been so many times in my life where I thought my musical path was going in one direction and then it went the other direction and it surprised me. But I started out kind of just always having like an affinity for music, but I came from a non-musical family. So listening back to some of the episodes, and it's like everybody's like, oh yeah, parents did music. It's kind of an obvious thing for me to get involved with, but neither of my parents had any musical background whatsoever. I'll take that back. My mom was in choir in 9th grade.
There we go. That's all you need.
So she did 1 year of choir, and that's mostly because she jumped around schools a little bit when she was in high school, so she didn't kind of get that consistency. But not to a point where she learned how to read music or anything like that. And so no instrumentalists in extended family, nothing. Like people will tinker around on the piano or guitar, but nobody really had any sort of like formal music education. So I didn't necessarily know that was what I wanted to do. But I sort of started kind of tinkering around as well on piano. My parents really wanted me to play guitar, and I think that was you, Kara, that said that, you also like the same thing. And so they put me in lessons at 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
On guitar. I had this little mini guitar. It was real cute. I think we still have it somewhere.
Like a ukulele, basically.
Yeah, it was like in between a ukulele and a full-size guitar. But and it was miserable. I kind of hated it. Just because I was so small and holding the guitar was hard enough. And then obviously like dealing with the finger calluses, like trying to build that up.
Oh, yeah.
As a child, I'm like, oh, pain. Music shouldn't be painful, right? So I did not last long with that. And my parents let me quit. I begged them. I was like, please, I don't want to. And they kind of kept slowly trying to get it back. And randomly for Christmas, I would get a guitar method book. And they'd be like, don't you want to start back?
Hint, hint.
And it was so interesting that they pushed music so hard, considering they did not do music themselves. But, and I have an older brother, and he didn't do music or anything, but I let guitar pass. I was like, that's not going to be my thing. And eventually I found interest in piano. And so my first instrument was technically a little digital keyboard, probably like one of those little 60 keys, did not have the sensitive touch. It was just loud blaring. Light up keys actually is what it was, it would show you how to play the songs by lighting up. And so I learned that first, just kind of playing by ear a little bit. And I guess I didn't really have any sort of formal music education until 6th grade band. I came from a really small rural school system in Southeast Alabama where we didn't have elementary music. So 6th grade was my first opportunity to really engage with music. And I had a hard time deciding whether or not I wanted to do band at all. I wasn't sure if that was something I wanted to commit to. And my mom encouraged me. She was like, well, talk to some of your friends that are older that are in band. Ask them, how they feel about it. And I said, okay. And so I talked to some of them, and they were like, we love it. It's so fun. And I was like, okay, mind made up. And then when I found out that it served as my PE credit, I was like, check, like double check.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, I don't have to run a mile every day. Heck yeah. So I joined band, played trumpet. Although that was not my first choice, I really wanted to be a percussionist. And my band director, as most band directors, guide you what they need. They're like, we have way too many people that want to play percussion, so trumpet it is. But, I fell in love with trumpet over the years of middle school through high school, and I did it all throughout high school. And then I always wanted to do choir, but my high school didn't have a choir until my last 2 to 3 years of in my timeline, it was my entire high school. But for everyone else that ever went to school there, it had been a recent thing. And it was the same. It met at the same time as band, so I couldn't. It was one of those things where you had to pick, and so I was committed to band already. There was no way I could switch out, and I loved band enough not to want to. But finally, my senior year, it opened up to where they were not at the same time. So I was able to do choir my senior year of high school. So that was when I did both.
And what high school did you go to?
I went to Slocum High School, which no one listening right now has ever heard of. I graduated with 75 people in my class.
Oh, wow. Man.
Yeah, compared to LD Bell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah,
it's a different experience.
Yeah, the school that I teach at, it's about 75 seniors right now. It's their smallest class.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
They came in, my seniors have told me that they came in the largest, and now that they're graduating, they're the smallest.
Dwindled down.
Yeah, from, people moving, probably.
Hopefully that's why.
Yeah.
Probably lots of dropouts. You don't have to put that part in there, but
man.
Yeah,
it's a small town, so
it happens with small towns.
Yeah.
But obvious to say, in a school system that only had 75 graduates, our whole town population was about 2,000. So really small town. The closest bigger city was Dothan, and I'm probably quoting this wrong, but I think it's around 65 to 75,000. Yeah. I'm probably way wrong.
Yeah, still smaller than Abilene.
But still smaller than Abilene, you're right. And so the arts culture in general wasn't huge in the area just because it was a small area. But I was able to do band and choir finally, and then I also actually started piano lessons my senior year. Did it for 1 year because I was getting ready to go to college, and I just kind of always wanted to take formal lessons on piano, and I did that. And so that was kind of my musical experience there in high school, and did theater throughout, and our theater program had a heavy musical theater component, so I was engaging in music in that way as well, and so that was a lot of fun. And so then I went straight off into 4-year college at Auburn, and actually, unlike maybe many of the people who you've interviewed so far, I didn't go in as a music major. I was not solid on that. I knew I really enjoyed it, but I think like most of us at some point we decide do I want to do that as a career or keep it as a hobby? Because there's a big difference. And so I wasn't quite sure, and I had gone through so many majors in my mind. At one point I wanted to be an engineer. I thought about pharmacy. I thought about theater because I really enjoyed theater. And ultimately, because I couldn't make up my mind, I went in as an undeclared liberal arts major.
Nice.
And so, however, I auditioned for band scholarships just to participate in band. And they kind of pull your leg a little bit there because you audition and they're like, oh, this is a music major only scholarship. So in order to get the scholarship, we only give these to music majors, and we really think you should be a music major. And I was like, oh, fine.
They dangled a turkey leg on a string.
Yeah, they're like, you want college paid for? Okay, this is what you have to do. And so because the way that they told me, as most of us, most listeners, if you have music degrees, you start out with those theory classes right from freshman year and everything. And so there's whereas a lot of other majors, they don't really start until junior, senior year in their major classes. Music starts right away. And so they're like, if you don't do music, you'll be better off if you start in music and take a few extra classes rather than if you do anything else and then you have to start as a music major later in life because you'll be pushed behind. So I said, why not? Let me see what this music major life is like and, see if it's something I want to stick with. And so they enrolled me in all those, introductory freshman music classes. And The rest is kind of history, not really. I think we all go through those moments where we are like, halfway through college, like, do I really still want to be doing this? Because you realize how much work it is. But I did. I truly loved it. I loved music theory classes. I loved my oral skills classes. I loved playing in a really good symphonic band and everything there at Auburn. I was in the marching band all 4 years. And I had gone from being in a 50 to 60 member marching band to a 75-member trumpet section.
Wow.
Oh, man.
So, that was a weird experience when you're in your trumpet section is bigger than your entire band you came from. So, I really enjoyed that experience, and I just fell in love with that idea of being around so many people and met friends so quickly because there were so many people there. I did my 4 years there. Like I said, it was an instrumental and vocal degree, like a lot of music ed degrees are these days. And when I got finished there, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to jump right into the real world or if I wanted to go on and get my master's. And getting my master's and doctorate was always something I knew I really wanted to do. And that was before I even decided on a major. I was like, I want to go all the way and get as much knowledge as I can in whatever I do. And so knowing that, I was like, should I do my master's right now? Because if I take off time, I may never go back because I was worried about motivation, getting back into school after enjoying that, full paycheck. So at the time, I decided to actually do my master's in music theory, which it's funny looking back on my story and my decisions because they were all made by totally random reasons. Like, undergrad decided to major based on a scholarship. Master's degree, I ultimately decided to do music theory because everyone told me you shouldn't get a master's in music ed right away until you have a little bit of teaching experience under your belt. And of course, I know people that do go straight away, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I took that advice to heart to think maybe that's a good idea to go, if I do want to do a master's in music ed, to get some more experience, to know kind of where are my weaknesses in teaching and work on those during my master's.
Yeah.
So, however, my interest in getting a master's immediately won over, and I was like, I'm going to do music theory. And I really loved music theory. And my trumpet professor, Dr. DeGotti at Auburn, he was wonderful, and he helped advise me into that. And he was like, you're really good at music theory, you know, and maybe that's something you could consider. And so I was like, why not? And applied at a few schools, ended up ultimately getting an assistantship to go to the University of Tennessee and teach oral skills there. And so that was a lot of fun. Spent my 2 years in Knoxville. Love Knoxville. Shout out Knoxville. It's a great place to be, great place to live. And I did master's there. And then I went into teaching full time. I knew that it was not feasible to go straight into my doctorate from there. I did need to get teaching experience. And I had played around with the idea of going straight into a doctorate in music theory and kind of doing the theory professor route. But ultimately, I knew I didn't want to rid myself of band altogether, and I wanted to set myself up to more be a band director instead. I got my first official teaching job at a high school in East Alabama, and it was a 7A school, which is the largest classification in Alabama. Big school, but it was a smaller program, and I was actually hired to start the choir there. They did not have a choir at the time, and they wanted to start one. And so that was a little stressful, being that it was my first year teaching and I had to start a program from scratch. And on top of that, I was also the assistant band director, did all of the football games and competitions. I conducted one of the bands. And then I also co-taught theater classes, music directed all the musicals.
Man.
It was a lot.
That is a lot.
Goodness. You're probably one of the few people that, that sounds so hard, but also you're probably one of the few people that got that much of a variety of experience at that young and that early on in your career.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for it looking back. And even at the time, I knew that it was really nice to have variation in my day and not to do the same thing every day. The only aspect of it that was truly exhausting was when, show times came for the musical, and that happened to be during the same time as show choir stuff or marching band stuff, and you had rehearsals every night between one of the groups, and it got busy in that way. But I really ultimately liked being able to split myself and work with different students and do different things in my day. So and like I mentioned, I had experience growing up myself with all of those areas, so it was kind of nice to be able to turn around and be a teacher of all those areas. And so I really enjoyed that, and I taught there for 2 years before I had the opportunity to go back to Auburn, because the school I was teaching at was really close to Auburn, and I knew that they were looking for more graduate assistants for their PhD program. and it was just kind of one of those things that, you're scrolling Facebook one day when you should be doing anything else. And I saw the advertisement that the music department had posted looking for more PhD students and graduate assistants. And I said, you know what, maybe it's a sign to just apply and see if this is the time. And it all worked out. I went and interviewed, and they're like, yeah, come on, we'll give you the assistantship. And so I ended up leaving that school a little bit earlier than I was planning to, but I knew my ultimate career goal was to get my PhD, and did that and powered through full-time 3 years. So it's 2 years of courses and then a year of dissertation. I got to work with all the bands there. I got to play a little bit with the bands, and I also got to sing in the choir again. So that was good because I did the chamber choir when I was an undergrad, and I got to come back and kind of see it 4 years later, and that was cool too. So I got to do it all. Got involved in theater at the university while I was back, and powered through those 3 years, and then here I am, McMurry.
Wow, man! Yeah. And now here, and so McMurry, McMurry is one of the smaller colleges in Abilene. About how big is, if you know how big McMurry is, and then about how big is your band program right now?
So McMurry has around 1,100 students enrolled. So very small.
Oh wow, that's almost exactly half of what Hardin-Simmons has.
Yeah, I think it's like McMurray's like half of Hardin-Simmons, which is half of ACU.
Yeah. It's like it's the Pokemon they evolve.
yeah. So we're a quarter of the size of ACU. So yeah, we're a D3 school as well, and we actually have, I think in marching band this year we had about 31 people. So it's okay size for that size of a school. I'm hoping to get it bigger, but they're really, really great students. And I just had the numbers of how many music majors we have, but I've already forgotten. But somewhere between 20 and 25-ish music majors between the choral and the instrumental. And
that's awesome. Yeah, man, that's a lot of, you've done a lot in how many years was that from when you started your master's all the way to now?
So I started my master's in 2014, so 8 years to now. I jam-packed a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, that's a lot. Wow. Yeah, so a couple things just from hearing that I kind of want to ask about. So first of all, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about maybe, I'm sure there's some people listening that are currently majoring in music education in college right now, maybe getting ready to graduate. We were just talking about this for both HSU and McMurry finals is this week as of recording this episode. And just for students that are getting ready to graduate, they're getting their bachelor's degree. It's interesting what you kind of said about, you decided to go straight into your master's degree. And I've definitely heard it both ways as well. And because I've heard a lot of people say it's good to have that teaching experience after you get your bachelor's, because that can, help a lot getting into master's, like what you said. But then I've also heard a lot of people say that, kind of like what you said with the motivation thing, is it's hard to, like I've talked to a lot of people that said, man, I wish I had just gotten my master's right after I graduated because it was just too hard to go back.
Because life happens, maybe get married, have kids.
Yeah. So do you ever like think back to that decision and think, what would have been different if you had chosen the other path, or if you think there's a better way to do it in your case? Or
I think that everything absolutely worked the way it was intended to for me. I definitely think that, for anybody else, it's just ultimately considering circumstances and what makes the most sense for you. For me at that time, I did not have a whole lot of leads on jobs as well. So while I was applying for grad schools, I was also applying for jobs, and I was applying for everything, choir jobs, band, high school band, middle school band, elementary, everything. And there just wasn't a whole lot out there at that time, and wasn't getting a whole lot of bites right out of undergrad. And so I'm also fortunate that the grad school thing worked out for me, because I don't know what I would have been doing, otherwise. I'm sure something would have come along. But I absolutely think that it worked the way it should. And what I tell my music education students now is, if they want to get a master's in music ed, if it's totally, again, up to their circumstances of whether or not they want to go immediately on, I try to encourage them to think about, if they know right now in the long run they want to do doctorate, you need teaching experience somewhere in there, between either bachelor's and master's or master's and doctorate. And sometimes I do wish I had gotten more than just 2 years before I jump back into doctorate. But I ultimately knew that my career goal was to teach college. I just always sort of had a heart for teaching college and being a college professor, and so that's why I wanted to try to get through it as quickly as possible so I could get to that point. But I think it's just different for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of things. It's not always black and white.
Oh, of course not.
It's just all dependent on that. And that's something that, like, I mean, for us, I mean, there was a time I'm still thinking about whether I'll go and get my master's at some point. If I do, it would probably be conducting either choral or orchestral. I don't know which one, but and I was originally gonna try to do that, right after we graduated, last year. Lots of different circumstances that came up, but it was one of those things where I realized, man, first of all, I don't know how I'm going to even do this, especially because, we were going to get married and everything too. But it was also just like, for where I'm at right now, I think I need to focus more on just writing music instead of, just going to school and all that for right now. But I think another thing too, going off of that, is like, it's one thing to go to graduate school to get a degree, but it's another thing to go to graduate school and you said you were looking for a job and you had kind of had a hard time with leads and everything. You go to a whole new school and you get a whole new amount of leads and connections through the people there, and many times in a whole different area. So that's a big advantage as well for that.
For sure.
So
I'm so thankful for all the connections I gained during my master's, and ultimately those are not the connections that got me my job after master's, but connections that I had from other musical circuits is how I got my first job. And you tend to find a lot these days that, and I kind of want to do like an informal survey of like every music educator that I know and say, like, did you know someone that helped you connect to that job that you're in? Because I feel like 9 times out of 10, the answer to that is yes. And it just shows how important networking is in this field.
Yeah. And I think that goes for like any job too.
Yeah.
I think
music especially.
Yeah, I mean, all my parents have told me, like, you just have to know somebody. So yeah.
And we think about, like, especially with music, you have to learn to trust the person, and so that reference goes a long way. And I try to tell my students that with everything that they do when they get hired to do gigs and things. I'm like, we want to be that responsible person that shows up on time, is prepared, because that is your reference to that job you want when you graduate, and it's an important reference because people need to know they can trust you.
And that's just something huge that that has come up, and I think with pretty much every person we've interviewed so far is just that importance of relationships with your students, relationships with other people, and everything. And it's just that more and more solidifying that idea of, and I think it's easy as a student. I mean, it was even easy for me to initially come in as a music major thinking, man, I have to be a really, really good music person to be able to do well in music, which is true. But you also have to be a really, really good people person.
Yes. And that can sometimes go further, rather.
Yes. Think about it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to assume it's like, when people interview you for a job, I mean, they're not just looking for, where this person's credentials, but how do they do with students and with people and just talking and everything. So, yeah, that's awesome.
So how did you find McMurry? Like, how did you find this job all the way in Alabama?
So, well, I guess that was a little part of my story I left out. So when I immediately graduated, or right when I had graduated Auburn with PhD, I had spent that entire year during dissertation time looking at jobs. Some colleges will hire you before you finish your dissertation, and so I had sort of been applying. But as we all know, a few years ago, was right in the center of the pandemic, and and a lot of colleges went on hiring freezes, and so that was a really tough time to be applying. But ultimately, almost a similar situation to when I graduated undergrad. I didn't have many bites by the time that I graduated, and I had to kind of decide, like, what's next. And I graduated without a job, so I actually moved to New York City for 2 weeks. We can go into that in a moment.
All right.
For 2 weeks. I loved it. So I didn't leave because I didn't love it. I left because I got this job. And so in that time, I monitor all these different, job sites, and one being higheredjobs.com is kind of the central location to go for any sort of college teaching jobs, not just music, but all of higher education. And I saw this job at McMurry University, and I was looking for a very particular type of job, and McMurry fit those qualifications that I was looking for in a job. So I applied, and then it was a really fast process. Just within a few days, they asked me to do a Zoom interview, And I did that, and then within a couple days after that, they invited me to campus to do the second round, and had to, of course, do presentation and interview with our administration and all kinds of things like that. And then within just about 2 to 3 days after that, they were calling me to offer me the position. So it moved very fast. And yeah, so it was actually surprisingly not through a connection. So I'm kind of going against what I just said, but but for me, I did not have any connection to Abilene. It was the second time in my life where I've moved to a city where I knew absolutely not a single person. And so that was, it was a difficult transition, but that's how I ended up here.
Well, let's assume that there are a lot of people out there that are kind of going through something similar to you, whether it's for a college job or just, any school. They're having to, because a lot of people get in that situation where they need to get a job somewhere, anywhere, and if they find one, even if it's across the country, they're gonna do it, and so they're in that situation. They have to go to a whole new place, whole new people. They don't know anybody. Maybe they don't have any connections to the program. I mean, what have you learned in your experience of kind of being in that situation that you think anyone else that might have to go through that should know as well?
Yeah, I certainly learned things from when I went to Knoxville and didn't really know anybody. That was the first time I moved and didn't know a soul in a city. And, I was so busy with my coursework that I didn't really have time to do much outside of that. And, of course, I met friends pretty easily through, roommates. My roommates just happened to be also grad students in music, and we just got randomly matched, and it worked out well. So, it was kind of left to to God there. But and here, I didn't have all that. I knew that coming in, I was going to essentially, the only really adults I was expecting to be around were my colleagues. And, that's a work relationship that doesn't always develop into more of a friendship, and thankfully those have. But outside of that, I just knew that what I did not do last time was I did not get involved with the community. I didn't get involved with organizations or anything like that. And I knew that was something I needed to do to really start to feel integrated more easily. And so that's when I sought out Chorus Abilene Chamber Singers, all those things. I got involved in a gym here, and I quickly met people through those kinds of things. So the best advice I can give anyone moving to somewhere you don't know is just get involved. And the easiest way to get involved is we're assuming here a lot of the people listen to this are musicians. Get involved in that community choir, that community band, make those connections there, because those are also the people that could potentially line you up for a job if you are maybe moving somewhere where you don't have a job. Those connections can be really important.
Let us take a quick break real quick so I can tell you a little bit about this podcast's primary sponsor, which is Christian Fortner Music. That's right, my own music business. This is the primary platform that I use to sell my music, and you can find it at www.christianfortner, that's Fortner, music.com. Now, you may be thinking, I don't know, this guy is a young composer. Does he really know what he's doing? Well, to be honest, none of us composers really know what we're doing, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. But if you want to kind of get an idea of what my music might be like and if it might be a good fit for your ensemble, you can actually get a free copy of music from me. That's right, a free piece of music. This isn't just a study score. This is full score and parts that you can use for your ensemble to perform completely for free. And you can do that by signing up for my mailing list. So if you go to my website, Christian Fortner, that's Fortner, music.com/mailings, you can sign up for my mailing list right there, and you'll get a link in your inbox where you can select a piece of music for either choir, string orchestra, or band. And I should also mention that the choir piece, it can be either an SAB, SA, or TB version. So for any of you out there that are looking for SAB, SA, TB, specific voicings like that, then this might be a good opportunity for you. So that's about it. Again, if that's something you'd be interested in, just check it out on my website. And now we can get back to the episode. Now, you said that for that first school you were at, it was a high school?
Yes.
Right? You said they
correct.
didn't have first we could talk about you just juggling everything, but you said they didn't have a choral program, but they wanted you to start one.
Yes.
So how did that go?
How do you even begin?
Yeah, what do you even do?
Did anybody help you, or they were like just...
No, it was just me, and Fortunately, I worked with a phenomenal theater director there who was kind of a big push in them wanting to start a choral program. I think she had sort of been talking to the administration like, hey, we need to hire someone. We need to get a choral program. Because, obviously choral programs often benefit musical theater programs quite a bit and vice versa. And so she had some ideas of some things, and she was just a great mentor throughout that entire process and those 2 years. But yeah, I came into the interview, and of course, them asking me, to start this program, my first question was, "What's the budget?" And that's an important question I think to ask in any interview is, "What kind of money are you coming into?" And they said, $0.
Nice.
Oh,
and
man.
I was like, okay, and I tried to tell them, the school has got to have some sort of way to just to get us off the ground. And fortunately, they were able to find funds, and they told me, they essentially said, give me a list of everything you absolutely have to start.
The bare minimum.
Truly the bare minimum. And one thing I didn't mention was the choral program had been in existence several years before. I can't remember when. It was like maybe the 90s, and it had ended. They'd cut it for some reason. And so it had been about 15, 20 years. And so there was actually a music library still.
Wow.
Thankfully, they didn't get rid of all that.
That's really good.
Oh,
yeah.
So we still had
that's so much more money that you'd have to.
Oh, yeah.
Starting
for sure.
from scratch.
Yeah, and of course, some of the music was really outdated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily, there were some SATB 4-part stuff that we can't start out singing this kind of stuff. And so I still had to order music for sure, but they were, thankfully the school was very good about getting me those things I needed. So I ordered a keyboard. We didn't have one, just for general accompanying purposes. And I was able to take off this really old nasty chalkboard and put up a whiteboard with staff staff lines on there, so I could start to actually teach them how to read the music and everything. And so they got me all the bare minimums, and it happened. It's kind of a blur at this point because it all happened so fast. And the other scary part of this was going into the job, they told me, oh yeah, we've already advertised this class on our course registration. People know this class is going to exist, and as of the previous year, so students were able to enroll in it, not knowing if this was even going to happen. And so surprisingly, we had 60 people that wanted to do choir between 2 different course periods, 2 different class periods. And so one of them, just solely by how it turned out, ended up being a women's choir, and the other one was sort of a joined choir. But even then, of course, I imagine the plague of most choir programs, there were not many tenors and basses.
Yeah.
And, so that was another additional challenge to deal with. But thankfully there was enough interest there to do this, or I don't know what I would have done if there had been, hey, there's 4 people that want to be in a choir. That would have been a lot harder to come back from than having 60 people to work with.
Yeah.
So.
And that was the first year. You were there for 2 years?
I was there for 2 years.
2 years. So that was the first year. Were you able to see any growth, or at least retention?
Yes. We had really great retention. The unfortunate thing was a large number of those 60 that wanted to do it were seniors.
Oh, okay.
Yes. They were, of course, they were like, I haven't had choir my whole 4 years. We have that opportunity. And they tend to be the people that have the more flexibility in their schedule by that point.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and they were a great group of seniors, and so they all graduated. But we did retain numbers. We even came up a little bit in numbers because by my second year, we added a show choir. Because that was something we saw interest that people needed or people really wanted. And that I was able to co-teach with the theater director. She, fortunately, had a lot of dance experience because I do not. And I was like, I cannot do show choir if you want me to teach them how to dance. Like grapevine. That's,
yeah, jazz square.
Yeah, jazz square.
We use those a lot.
So I certainly, I feel like I was truly in the best position to gain a lot of experience in that job through all those things.
So what was their musical knowledge, since it was their first, or that was choir was just beginning? Like, what were your students' prior knowledge about?
Well, fortunately,
music?
I had some that were in band, so they did read music, and they had that experience. But even then, I would say, I didn't do a formal poll on this, but I would say 90% of them had no formal vocal training. Even if they were, instrumentalists, they had no idea how to use their voices. So that was hard to start off, especially because, how to teach, 60 people how to read music when usually you have some people along the road to help out with the ones that don't know, but most of them did not. But and we had some people who had grown up doing, like, say they did like a youth orchestra and then they no longer played in that, but so varying experience, but it wasn't much at all.
Wow. So what were some of the steps you took as far as, well, let me back up a second. So you kind of mentioned a couple of those bare minimum things. I just want to go back and could you kind of
what were those?
Formally list all those things.
Let's
just
see.
for anyone listening that might they may be in the same scenario and they have no idea where they should start, what they should focus on.
Well, I will say, so I was fortunate enough to have the space that they put me in, the classroom they put me in, had been the former choir room back when the choir existed, but it was really outdated. The sound panels did not work anymore. I mean, they were just falling apart. But I told them, it's hard to remember the exact list I gave them now, but like I mentioned, I wanted a whiteboard where I could actually, especially coming straight out of my music theory master's, I was very passionate about teaching these students how to read music, no matter if they didn't have any experience, because ultimately, that's our job. Not to just here's your part, sing it back, but here is actually how you can be an independent musician. So that whiteboard was important to me. The keyboard was important to me. Just there was no piano in the school outside of our surprisingly Steinway on the stage.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an older one that had been donated. So probably, they say if a non-Steinway technician works on them, then it's no longer Steinway. But so it probably wasn't, but it had the name on there, and it was a great piano. But that was our only piano in the whole school, and I couldn't squeeze that in my little classroom. So we got that keyboard, and then I just asked for funds for new music. I was able to do a little bit with what was in there, but a lot of what had been purchased were like pops type music. And so, obviously I want to introduce them to choral literature standards and things like that, outside of the pop realm. And so I had to order all kinds of new stuff, but really that was about the bare minimum. I mean, if you think about starting a choir, fortunately we don't have to buy instruments. If they were like start a band, it's like, okay, we have to have more money.
Right.
I need a lot of instruments. And so it's very fortunate that you can get a choir going on a minimal budget. I had already told them that, something I was interested in doing was getting some sort of formal attire for the concert or for the choir to wear. But, knowing that to start off, it was just going to be concert black, having them go take care of those things. You can do that easily on a budget without having formal tuxes and dresses. We surprisingly put in a request going into our second year for risers because, we convinced them that if you guys want us to have a show choir, doesn't work on a flat stage. And so somehow we were able to tap into $11,000 that were just donated to us for risers, like formal show choir risers. And so really thankful. So it was a good situation where the administration were very supportive of wanting to make it happen and get it off the ground running, and they were able to give a lot of those things.
It kind of reminds me, you listening off all those different things and kind of the different, there are certain things you absolutely need, and then other things that you want to have, but you can do without, kind of like the tuxes and dresses thing, and you can still have people come in formal attire. It's kind of like, I remember in like my psychology classes and stuff, we like talk about all the great like philosophers or not philosophers, what do you call them? Is it just psychologists? I guess.
I don't know.
But I specifically remember there was one called his last name was Maslow, and he's kind of known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's kind of like for people, it's like, okay, it kind of has different tiers, and it's like, okay, the thing you absolutely need to start out with is, I think, like food or shelter. Like it's one of those two, and then the other one is it's like shelter second, and then and then it just kind of goes up, and I kind of think like there's a hierarchy of needs for starting a program as well, and I guess the music itself is like the food. Kind of, and then the shelter, it's like, okay, you need a space and piano accompaniment.
Like I said, I'm just glad it wasn't band.
Because
we could work with the minimal.
That's a lot of food.
Right. And the thing I wanted most from the administrators was just to understand that this was a program in development, and let's not do maybe the first Veterans Day program and things like that. Let's take some time to build this over a semester, and then maybe we can see where we're at the end. So we got by with what we needed, and I started making obviously long-term goal plans of what the other things that I wanted to to purchase, and we did do fundraising to help us eventually in that toward the end of I think it was the end of the first year that I was there. We fundraised for those formal dresses. We actually had a lot of tuxes in storage from the theater, and so she was kind enough to let us use those for our guys, and all of our ladies we purchased new dresses for them. Cool. And same with show choir. We just did a lot of fundraising, and fundraising is a thing.
Yeah. Well, you were really good at working with what you had. And I mean, we've definitely seen that with you, Kara. I mean, Kara, you came from a large school that had a lot of resources and years and years of support and experience behind there, and then being at a much smaller school now, I mean, there were some things you had to kind of improvise on, and I remember when we first saw your choir rooms and stuff, one of the biggest things that jumped out was the risers.
Oh my gosh.
Were in terrible.
What's the junior high risers?
Yeah,
they're in shambles.
In terrible shape.
Disgusting.
And I mean, you were kind of freaking out because it's like, okay, well, we can't use these. What do I do?
They're very hazardous.
Yes.
So,
man.
Yes.
They're not even screws are off. There's one that if you step on one side, it just goes straight up, and
wow.
the carpet on it is torn, so you can see the wood.
Each of them was a seesaw
Yeah.
when you walk across it. But anyways, you kind of improvised, and even though it wasn't ideal, you had all your junior high students sit in chairs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other people out there that do that, but obviously ideally you want to have the risers, but that was just something you had to do.
That's what they were used to for 2 years, because they couldn't use the risers. Everybody was in chairs for social distancing. So
sometimes you just got to work with what you got.
And they hadn't been in that choir room for a whole year.
Yeah.
They met in the band hall.
That's crazy. So you did really good work on starting up that new program. Well, before we move on, is there anything else in regards to starting up a new program that you think anyone else should just kind of know in general?
Well, not to totally steal D. Romine's words, but with everything, seek help. That's something I did not do as much as I should have, because I think especially new teachers, you think you should have the answers to everything. You're like, if I'm a real teacher, if I'm a true teacher, and I'm supposed to be now, I should be able to do all this stuff, and I shouldn't have to seek help. And that's just not true. There's so many things. I mentioned that my goal was to get as much knowledge as I could in whatever field I chose, and obviously the understanding developed that you never stop learning. And so even now there's certainly things that I do not know, and I'm working on making those better. But at that time, I was just that stubborn new teacher that I got this. So same as Dr. Romine said, is just seek help.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I imagine, I haven't actually been in the situation, but I would assume that I feel like it'd be really hard, especially as in many cases, maybe you're the only music guy on staff, right? And it's not like you're teaching math or English, and there's probably at least one or two other English or math teachers that you can already talk to, and instead you're the only one. And I feel like for me that'd be kind of hard to go to my principal or whoever and be like, I know you hired me because I'm supposed to know what I'm doing in regards to music, but I actually still don't know.
But SOS.
Yeah, but there's also no one else here that knows how to do music, so that's kind of supposed to be me, but I don't know. But I can see how, that'd be really hard to ask for help, but yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Okay, and so you did really good with that program and everything, and now you're at McMurry, which obviously that band program, it's not new, but it's definitely a smaller program, and I know you're working on growing that as well. Kind of how's that been going for you, and what have you worked with recruiting as far as that goes? And it's obviously that's a college setting, which is very different, but it's also a very small college setting, which is also different in many aspects.
Yeah, it's such a different world, especially going from my only teaching experience up to this point, as a full-time teacher, was high school. Like I mentioned, I taught some classes in both my master's and PhD as an assistantship, but that's not the same, and within that, they were all theory and oral skills classes. So coming to McMurry and being the band guy, and because as I mentioned, when I taught high school, I was the assistant band director, so I helped out with the band, but there was a band director there, and he made the decisions, he ran the program, organized the program, I was just there for support. So having to be that person here now that is over everything, in charge of the entire budget for the band program, that's scary, But that is actually something I was thinking about on the way here was, what makes McMurry different as far as the experience that I've gained here versus high school, and it is recruiting, and yes, in high school, in a lot of ways, you have to recruit, especially junior high, getting the students from elementary to junior high, continuing that pipeline from junior high to high school is a lot of work as well, but it's just a different way. You approach it differently with college, because in so many ways, and we refer to this a lot in higher education as like colleges are essentially, it's a market, and it's how can you sell your product to students that are going to college better than another college might be able to. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially when, Hardin-Simmons and McMurry are very similar universities. Hardin-Simmons is bigger, but they're both small D3 Christian universities. And what do we have that Hardin-Simmons doesn't, and vice versa. And so that can certainly be challenges. I've actually really enjoyed the recruiting aspect of my job. I've been able to get out to high schools and work with their bands and do clinics and get to meet people that way. I've spent a lot of time focusing attention on starting events and programs that just get high school students onto our campus, so that maybe seeing campus and feeling what it might be like to be a student there would be something that is tempting for them, and just trying to be that cool band director that's like, hey, how you doing? Come on, just trying to relate. And it's funny because this is sort of off topic, but my students always make fun of me when I use slang or and I'm like, y'all, I'm not that old. Don't make fun of me, and so I try to be like hey, look, we have a lot of fun here, but you're going to learn. I do have high expectations for the students here and everything. But we tried to I initiated doing a high school honor band this year, and it's something McMurry has not done, and I thought that'd be a great way to get students on campus. And we had several students register for it, and then we had our ice days the weekend that was supposed to happen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
wow.
course.
Yeah, so we had to cancel the event the day before students were supposed to come, and we worked our hardest to look at the schedule and see how we could reschedule. And college campuses are just busy. It's hard. That takes a lot of logistics to get it even scheduled the first time. So it just was not going to be possible for us to redo it. And unfortunately, of course, we had already ordered the T-shirts with the year on it and everything.
Oh my gosh.
So
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
We had a similar situation. It wasn't quite that bad as far as last minute goes, but we had a similar situation with choir at HSU this year. We were going to do a an all-state camp for choir this summer, and it looked like it was going to be going, and we started advertising for it, but then it was just never mind, it's not going to be able to happen this year. So and I imagine
that did happen to a lot of people during the COVID time, especially. And so it was so unfortunate that COVID was not the thing that kept us from doing it. It was ice, and we're in Texas, and it's
exactly.
That's not what you expect. And of course we had ice twice this whole spring and or this winter, and one of those times was that weekend.
It had to be,
of course. So that that was still a great tool to at least get me students' names and contact information. And so I've been able to follow up with them, to say things like, I know we're not doing this event, but you're welcome, to come to. We are doing our summer camps, which McMurry has done for several years until COVID. They had to go on a hiatus for them, but we are bringing those back this summer, and we're hoping to, again, get people on campus. And we have a lot of our current students who did those camps when they were in high school, and they meant a lot to them, and that's what ended up helping them choose to come to McMurry. So I think those events are really important.
One of the common things I think that I hear in regards to business in general, but even with this recruiting is you want to be able to be personal, obviously you want to be genuine, but you want to show that you want to provide value for them. And that's what doing things like going out, like I said, doing clinics with bands or bringing them to campus and doing events, because it's those are fun and everything, but you're also helping them.
Right.
It's not them trying to help you.
Right.
Right.
It's a little bit of both.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. But they know that if they can see, wow, this guy really just wants to help me do better. And that speaks to a lot of people.
Yeah, it sort of continues on the theme you guys have had for a few weeks now of building those relationships even before they are officially students there. If they can see that potential for a good professor-student relationship and a good mentorship before they step foot on campus, I think that is a lot of times what encourages them to go that route.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome.
I kind of wanted to go back and ask you on your high school experience,
Sure.
What literature did you have to pick for them?
So I wanted, of course, so badly to get them to singing all of the, like I said, 4-part stuff as quickly as I could. And I just knew that, especially with numbers, my SATB, or rather my joint choir that I had, Mixed Voices Choir, was the biggest one, and we had about 32. And so I knew that it was feasible that maybe by the end of the semester I could at least introduce them to singing in 4 parts. Surprisingly, I was able to throw them into it the first semester, knowing that, it's such a big dilemma, of course, in choral teaching of, rote versus note kind of teaching. And like, you don't want to teach through rote, but when you have 60 people who don't know how to read music, you have to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you're on those time constraints, it's just not possible to do anything else. So I did throw some 3 and 4 part stuff at them first semester, but it was all simple harmonic stuff, nothing that challenged the ears too much. And, we just really we had to beat music in the ground a little bit and just get them used to singing independently. And being that my experience, at least my my bachelor's degree, although it was instrumental and vocal, no bachelor's of music ed is truly well balanced in both. You just can't take enough classes, and you kind of have to specify or specialize. And so most of my courses were in instrumental, and I did have a couple in choral, but things you don't really think about until you're thrown into the position, like seating. Like, how do I seating is something that every choir director thinks about, but how does that decision different when you have a brand new choir of singers versus singers who've been doing it for a while? And so that created challenges, because I would put it doesn't matter who I put near the sopranos, they would try to sing the soprano part.
Yes.
Yes. Nobody wanted to just jump onto the harmony. And so I didn't do any super great masterwork type, super artistic choral music those 2 years, because it was a building process. So we did continue to do, just on JW Pepper, looking at things that were on prescribed music lists for different festival things. But, we obviously had to go a little bit easier than maybe the 7A choral expectation for those first couple years. And we did not go to assessment those 2 years, because it was obviously, it was growth, and trying to get to the point where we could go to assessment. But I tried to guide them to at least get used to singing music like that. And so I selected music similar to what they would sing at contests, but on an easier level.
Cool. That's awesome. Now, and then I also wanted to ask, in regards to your time at that high school, you just described all of these things that you were doing with the choir, but that was just with the choir.
Right,
you were still doing band, and you said you were doing theater stuff as well, right? How did you? Or if you think you even had a system on how you did this, but how was it just having to do all of those different things all at once?
Here's the thing that I feel like a lot of college students don't realize, and I certainly didn't realize at the time, was all those time management skills that you're learning in college that people harp on you about your practice time and your homework time and your ensemble time. It's meaningful to get those skills down, because, as we know, teachers are very busy, you know, and so you kind of have to carry those time management skills with you. And so I'm fortunate that I did learn that lesson early on in college, and I felt pretty good about managing my time and knowing that I just absolutely had to have a calendar. I don't know if there's any teacher out there that doesn't have a calendar. I don't know how. If you don't use reminders on your phone or something like that, I absolutely have to have those. So that was certainly something that helped me. It was my time management skills. But all that to say, with how busy choir was, I would argue to say my busiest group that I was with was theater, though. Even busier than choir, just because there's so much that goes with theater, and I co-taught 2 periods of theater, at least that first year, and musical theater, with set design and stuff, and wanting to be involved with those kinds of things and be part of all of it, even though I didn't have set design experience. When they had their production days and they built the sets, I wanted to be there to help, to show them that I cared, and it was hard to balance all of that all the time. Yeah. And helping go clean out our costume closets and things like that, and figure out what we're going to wear, and ultimately all of that with teaching the vocal music for all of the musicals that we did, and I was really proud of the stuff that we were able to get to with that. I'm most proud. We did Into the Woods while I was there, and I still am like, I cannot believe we did that, because if anybody knows Into the Woods, it's a very, very challenging score.
Yeah, it's huge.
But yeah, musical theater was very busy, and of course football. I mean, with the marching band, fall was, we went to every home and away game.
Yeah. Oh man!
And being that we were a 7A school, we had to travel pretty far sometimes, up to 3 hours for games on Friday nights, and get back super late, and sometimes have a competition the next day. We also hosted our own marching festival in October, and planning all that stuff. And of course, like I said, I'm very thankful for the head band director that was there, because ultimately he ran it all and I supported, he delegated things. But, I was glad that was something I didn't have to spend as much time thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So the biggest thing it sounds like you're saying is the time management.
For sure.
And it reminds me of Hardin Simmons, our school president, President Brummeyer. He always makes it a priority to try to meet with any student that visits our campus if he's there, and every single time we take a student by his office and he talks to him, he always talks about the importance of time and time management, and he puts it in a really good way. He says one of the greatest gifts that the good Lord has given you is your time. And so you want to honor him by using it wisely and spending it wisely. And then he talks about the calendar and everything. And it's funny how, if there are any high schoolers listening that happen to be listening to this, you need to start using your calendar.
Now.
Yes.
Make it a habit. Planner.
Yes. A planner, yes. I mean, if it's digital, physical,
something.
Even making a checklist for the week that you have to get done by the end of the week. I mean, everyone's different in how they like to do it, but that's huge. I think overall, over the course of this whole conversation, I'm getting that, okay, 1, you need to manage your time. 2, you need to manage your resources, all those needs that we were saying earlier. And 3, you want to manage your relationships because you want to be able to maintain each of those. So that's kind of, it's like the trifecta of success. I don't know. I don't know what you'd call that.
Maybe.
Well, I just think of trifecta. There's this place in Fort Worth called First Watch. And they have it's a brunch place. And
I've been to one of those.
Yeah, and they have what's called a trifecta, and it's like eggs and stuff. So
there you go. It's the eggs, bacon, and sausage of teaching.
Ew.
That sounds horrible. It's like, and everyone listening is like, I don't want to teach anymore.
Unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe. Okay, well, I think we've got a lot of good stuff in there. Is there anything else that you think you just want to share with our listeners that you think would be useful for them to know? You've already given us a lot of great wisdom bombs.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because like I said, if I can match up to any of your previous listeners, that would be, earn my spot here. I would say, and this is not necessarily something we talked a lot about, but, looking back, I'm very thankful that I did choir, theater, and band, and because ultimately, and I tell everyone this, that it contributed to my comprehensive musicianship and the way that I approach things. Being able to approach a band with a choral mindset or approach a choir with a band mindset, because there are different things that come with all of those areas, and it makes you so much more of a marketable educator as well if you will take that opportunity to join choir as a band student when you have that semester. If you obviously, it doesn't always work the same way with choral students being able to just jump in a band, not having experience, but if you can take up that instrument and learn a little bit about it, and understand, or go just even sitting in on a rehearsal of a band director and seeing how they work and rehearse, because you can take little nuggets of knowledge from both sides, and ultimately, like I said, that contributes to your own teaching and can make you much more marketable for when you start looking for jobs and going to grad schools and all of that.
And pretty much everything you just listed there, I'm just thinking in terms of schooling, like in college. I mean, if you major in music ed choral, you're still going to have your your instrumental perspective classes and stuff like that, but pretty much everything you listed there is stuff that is not, I don't think, is ever going to really be required of you to do in school, but it is going to be more than possible for you to do, to take advantage of. So that's just something that is on you as a student, and for all of us, even for me still. I have to take advantage of the opportunities that I know are around me in the community if I really want to work on growing more as a composer, and for you, Kara, as a teacher. And you're not necessarily going to have people, you're not always going to have Brady McNeil literally talking into your ear saying, hey, you should go do this other stuff.
Right.
But with that being said, hey, go do this other stuff.
Yeah, just put my head in my voice in your head, and just hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And I tell my students, one thing, because because at Auburn our degree was split, instrumental vocal, all instrumental music ed majors had to be in choir for a semester. It was a requirement, and I grew so much being in choir, and ultimately it was kind of a good recruiting tool for them too, because I stayed in choir. I was like, oh, I like this college literature, I'm going to stay in this, and end up doing the chamber choir the whole time I was there, and loved it. And so I tell my students at McMurry that are instrumentalists, I'm like, go join chanters, that's our choir. I'm like, go join for a semester, because your ear will develop so much more than just sitting around playing an instrument where you press the button and the noise comes out, and you're not necessarily always processing what's coming out of your instrument.
Yeah, cool. Well, before we go, do you just want to tell us a little bit more about just your program that you got at McMurry, and if anyone listening is interested in looking at any young people that are interested in looking at schools, whether they want to major in music or not, or they just want to participate in band or choir, and just kind of tell them what you got over there at McMurry and how they can find you and reach out to you.
Sure. So we have 2 bachelor's degrees that you can do in our music program. One is our music education degree, and one is our bachelor's of arts, which a lot of our students who want to go the performance route tend to go that route. The cool thing about McMurry is that every student's required to have a minor, and so we also have a music minor, and so we get a lot of involvement in that way. And I think it also, again, contributes to making students more marketable if they can get a minor in something else. But all of our ensembles are open to non-majors, and we have scholarships both for majors and for non-majors, and quite a decent amount of money that we can offer. Most of our students that participate in band are on scholarship, and so mcm.edu, that's the place right there to check out McMurry, and we'd be happy to have anyone. I feel like we've developed a really good community of inclusion with our department, and I feel like it's just a great place to be.
And did you say that y'all are doing some summer
if you're in high school, we are doing our summer camps, and that's for those incoming 9th through 12th graders, and so we have our summer band and drum major camp, so that kind of functions as a concert band program. So you come and sit down, you get to rehearse wind band music with all of their high schoolers and a clinician, and then we have electives built into our camps where you can go learn about music theory, you can learn about voice, you can learn about the science of music. That's a very popular elective. And then master classes with some of our faculty and some of our guest faculty. And then, like I said, the drum major aspect of that is we have classes specific to band leadership and conducting and salutes and all those kinds of things. And then we also have our marching arts camp, and that is for our drumline and color guard folks. And so the first one, the band camp, is July 10th through the 14th, and the marching arts is the 17th through the 20th of July. So
and if they're interested in registering for one of those, can they just do that through like the McMurry website?
Yes. Yep. If you go to mcm.edu, I believe it's mcm.edu/music. Try that. We'll see. Just Google McMurry Music, and there's an events page. And we're actually working on getting registration live. By the time this comes out, it should be live. And so, go and register for that.
Cool. Is there a registration deadline? I'm just thinking in terms of, because it may not still be a couple weeks until this episode comes out.
I know that we have, so our prices go up after June 1st. I don't know when this is coming out, so you might have to jump on that quick. But I think the deadline is probably going to be, I don't think we've set a hard deadline yet. It just depends on how the numbers look, but it'll probably be around July 1st, just because that gives us some time.
Gotcha. So registration shouldn't be closed by the time, this episode is released, so if that's something you're interested in, then by all means, go support Brady, go support McMurry, Abilene, local university, music.
Love to have
we're really lucky to have such a wide variety of music programs in Abilene, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic where it's like, we're kind of competing against each other, but also the thing about music in and of itself is an inclusive and is a teamwork thing for between schools, between everybody. So
everybody's so supportive.
For sure. Cool. Alrighty. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, Brady, for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me.
Great. Yeah. Bye.